The hotel was buzzing with activity, the kind of quiet hum that comes when people are focused but trying not to seem too eager. Waiters moved carefully between tables, carrying trays with delicate teapots and crystal glasses, and a soft scent of fresh coffee mixed with polished wood filled the air. It was a beautiful day outside, the sun shining on the hotel's grand entrance, but inside, everyone's attention was on the room prepared for an unusual gathering. 40 experts in Arabic language had been invited, and the atmosphere was tense yet polite. Nobody knew exactly what was about to happen, but there was a quiet sense that this would not be an ordinary meeting. The sheikh entered the room quietly, wearing a simple white robe and a faint smile. There was nothing flashy about him, no jewelry or bold statement to announce his presence. But the moment he walked in, a subtle shift occurred. People straightened in their chairs, papers were adjusted, pens poised. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and curious, scanning the room as if he was already reading everyone's thoughts. Nobody spoke at first. He moved to the front, nodded slightly, and a hush settled over the room like a soft curtain. The experts exchanged quick glances. They had been invited to this session with the promise of discussing classical Arabic, its history, and its intricate beauty. Each of them carried confidence like armor. Years of study, degrees, and accomplishments were tucked neatly into their minds, ready to shine at the right moment. Some were professors, some authors, some linguists, all proud of their knowledge. They had no idea that this would test more than their memory. It would test humility, observation, and the ability to see beyond titles. A young waitress moved quietly along the side of the room, carrying a small tray with teacups. She had been working at this hotel for a few years and knew how to move without drawing attention. She smiled politely at the guests as she offered tea, but her eyes kept darting toward the front of the room. There was something unusual about the gathering, something she couldn't quite place, but she was curious. Most of the experts ignored her entirely, too focused on impressing the sheikh with their knowledge. She poured tea for one of the professors, who barely nodded in acknowledgement, clearly preoccupied with what he would say when the discussion began. The sheikh finally spoke. His voice was calm, deep, and carried the kind of authority that did not need to be loud. "I have a phrase," he said. "A phrase from classical Arabic. Carries meaning beyond the words. I want someone to explain it fully, including its history, its use, and its nuance." He smiled faintly. "Who will try?" Hands shot up immediately. Each expert felt confident. This was their moment to shine, to demonstrate the depth of their learning. One by one they were called. The first began to explain, but the sheikh's smile did not widen. He listened carefully, nodding occasionally, but something was missing. The next expert gave a more elaborate answer, citing historical texts, quoting famous scholars. The room felt impressed at first, but then the sheikh's expression became slightly serious. There was subtle tension now. Each explanation had small errors, overlooked details or misinterpretations. The experts began to feel it too. They had prepared for a discussion, but nobody expected this subtle challenge. The young waitress watched from her corner. She was not supposed to be part of the discussion, yet she found herself drawn in. She had grown up in a family that loved language, stories, and poetry. Her grandfather had taught her old manuscripts, taught her the beauty in every word, every letter. She remembered reading phrases aloud in the quiet of her room, imagining the people who had written them centuries ago. Her mind was alert, understanding the errors that the experts had made. But she hesitated. Who was she to speak? She was a waitress, serving tea and clearing tables, not a scholar. Yet a small voice inside her urged her to listen carefully, to see if the truth would be noticed. Time passed. Each expert spoke, one after another. Some became defensive when corrected. Others tried to embellish their answers with fancy terms. But the sheikh remained composed. He had a gentle yet firm way of guiding the conversation, letting each person reveal their limits without shame, simply observing and waiting. The room was polite, but the air felt heavy with frustration. Nobody wanted to admit their uncertainty. Pride was high, and the realization that they might not know everything made some shift uncomfortably in their chairs. The waitress continued to observe quietly. She noticed patterns the experts missed, connections that were simple but elegant. She realized that the phrase was not just about grammar or vocabulary. It was about culture, emotion, and context. It carried meaning that only someone who had experienced life, not just studied books, could truly explain. She thought about the stories her grandfather told her, about travelers, poets, and the wisdom hidden in seemingly simple words. She remembered the mornings spent reading before school, the evenings spent copying letters from old manuscripts. She understood the phrase deeply, but still she was invisible. Everyone in the room assumed knowledge belonged only to those with certificates, titles, and degrees. Finally, after all 40 experts had given their answers, the sheikh looked around. There was silence. Some experts were nervously checking notes. Others were whispering to each other. "It seems," he said gently, "that no one has fully grasped the meaning. Perhaps someone else would like to try." His eyes swept the room slowly, with patience and curiosity. There was a quiet moment when the room seemed to hold its breath. Nobody moved. The experts, now slightly embarrassed, stared at each other, hoping someone else might save the day. The waitress felt her heart pound. She knew this was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where the knowledge she had quietly nurtured could finally be shared. But fear held her back. She was just a waitress. What if they laughed? What if the sheikh dismissed her? Yet, the truth in her mind pressed harder. She wanted to speak, not for recognition, but to honor the words themselves. The sheikh waited. His presence was calm but commanding. He did not need to speak again. His silence was an invitation. The room grew still, as if every heartbeat could be heard. The waitress took a deep breath. She set down the tray she had been holding, wiped her hands, and quietly asked, "May I speak?" The words barely rose above a whisper, but they were enough. A few heads turned. Some experts chuckled quietly, some raised eyebrows in disbelief. "The waitress?" someone muttered. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The room was no longer polite. It was incredulous. How could someone without a title, without recognition, offer insight where 40 experts had struggled? The sheikh smiled faintly. "Please," he said, nodding toward her. "Go ahead." Her voice grew a little steadier. She began slowly, carefully explaining the phrase. She spoke about its origin, the context in which it was used, and the emotional depth carried in the words. She described nuances that were subtle, things that books alone could not teach. Her explanation was clear and precise, yet gentle, showing both respect and understanding. As she spoke, the room quieted further. The experts leaned forward, some frowning, some whispering to each other. Slowly, it became clear. She was correct. She had seen what the others had missed. She understood more than they had. The sheikh's eyes twinkled, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. By the time she finished, the silence in the room was complete. The 40 experts looked at each other in disbelief. Some felt ashamed, some amazed, some humbled. The sheikh stood quietly, allowing the moment to sink in. The young waitress had done what nobody else could. She had answered not because of credentials or recognition, but because she knew, truly knew, the language and its soul. Pride, titles, and assumptions had all failed, but patience, curiosity, and genuine understanding had triumphed. The story of that day was not yet over, but for the first time, a simple waitress had shown that knowledge could live anywhere, even in the quiet corners where nobody expected to find it. The lesson was clear. Wisdom often comes not from loud voices, but from the quiet courage to speak when the truth is known. And at that moment, in that room filled with experts, the young waitress's courage had made everyone pause, reconsider, and respect the unseen depths of human knowledge. The room remained silent for a few long seconds after the waitress spoke. The 40 experts, who had carried themselves with confidence just moments ago, now seemed uneasy. Some looked down at their notes, as if checking to see if she had somehow copied from them. Others shifted in their chairs, exchanging uncertain glances. The sheikh, who had been quietly observing, allowed the silence to stretch. He did not interrupt, did not comment, only watched with a calm intensity that made everyone feel both nervous and exposed. The waitress, still standing, felt her hands tremble slightly. She had spoken carefully, and yet the weight of the room's attention pressed down on her. She could feel the eyes of every expert and the sheikh upon her. For a moment, she imagined them laughing at her audacity, a mere waitress daring to correct 40 learned minds. But when she looked into the sheikh's eyes, she saw something that gave her courage. A spark of approval, a quiet acknowledgement that she was not wrong. Slowly, the experts began to respond, though not as they had before. One of the older professors cleared his throat. "That's unusual," he said carefully. "I had not considered the phrase in that light. You have taken context into account in a way that I did not." There was an awkward pause, and the professor's words hung in the air. The other experts were unsure whether to argue, dismiss, or applaud. Their pride fought with reason, and for the first time in years, some felt genuinely humbled. The waitress remained composed, nodding slightly as the professor spoke. She was not seeking praise. She only wanted to explain clearly, to share the depth of knowledge she had carried quietly all these years. She remembered the mornings in her grandfather's study, poring over fragile manuscripts, copying phrases letter by letter, learning their meaning not just in words, but in the stories they held. Every phrase had a heartbeat, a memory, and she had learned to listen. That experience, which nobody else had valued, had prepared her for this moment. A younger expert, known for his work in Arabic literature, spoke next. His voice was sharper, more defensive. "But she is not formally trained. How can we be sure her interpretation is accurate? We have spent years studying this language." There was a faint murmur of agreement from a few others, though it was mixed with uncertainty. The sheikh listened, nodding slowly, but said nothing. His silence seemed to carry a quiet power, letting the conversation unfold naturally. The waitress looked at the young expert and replied softly but firmly, "I understand your concern. I may not have a formal degree, but I have studied these texts deeply, and I have lived with these words. Understanding language is more than memorizing rules or quoting scholars. It is about seeing the meaning, feeling the context, and respecting the history. That is why I speak as I do." Her voice was calm, yet carried conviction, and her words had an effect she did not expect. The room grew quieter still. Some experts frowned, others opened their mouths to respond, but the sheikh raised a hand slightly, signaling them to wait. There was a tension in the air that was almost tangible. Pride had met humility, knowledge had met experience, and the collision was uncomfortable for those whose identity was built around titles and recognition. The experts realized that their carefully rehearsed answers, their confident displays of learning, had failed to grasp the deeper meaning. They had relied on the appearance of knowledge rather than the truth of understanding. For the first time, many of them felt the weight of their limitations, and it was an unfamiliar and humbling sensation. Meanwhile, the waitress noticed the subtle shift in the room. Some of the experts were now listening, not with the expectation of correcting her, but with genuine curiosity. They leaned forward slightly, trying to understand the clarity and depth she had brought to the phrase. The sheikh, standing at the front, nodded ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly, acknowledging her insight without words. His calm demeanor gave her strength. She realized that the power of true knowledge was not in loud declarations, but in quiet confidence and patience. After a moment, one of the more respected scholars, a woman known for her work on classical texts, spoke. "It seems we have all overlooked the simplest, yet most important aspects of this phrase," she admitted. Her tone was respectful, tinged with humility. She turned slightly toward the waitress and added, "Your understanding has opened a perspective that we, despite our years of study, did not consider. We must reconsider our approach." The words were sincere, and they carried a weight that surprised everyone, including the experts themselves. The sheikh finally spoke, his voice gentle but authoritative. "Knowledge is not always found in degrees or titles. It is found in those who observe, who listen, and who seek the truth beyond recognition or applause. Today, we have learned that wisdom may appear in unexpected places. His eyes lingered on the waitress for a moment, and she felt a warmth in his gaze that went beyond acknowledgement. It was respect, and an understanding that she had earned her place in that room through insight and courage. The room remained quiet after his words, each expert reflecting on the experience. For some, it was a blow to their ego. For others, it was a humbling lesson in the importance of observation and understanding over mere knowledge. They began to discuss softly among themselves, sharing thoughts and interpretations that they had previously overlooked. The conversation shifted from competition to curiosity, from pride to reflection. The waitress, still standing at the side, watched quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment. She had spoken her truth, and it had been received not with ridicule, but with thoughtfulness and respect. The sheikh then asked a question that drew everyone's attention again. "Tell me," he said, "how did you come to understand this phrase so fully?" The experts looked at the waitress expectantly, some with skepticism, some with genuine interest. She smiled faintly and spoke of her grandfather, of the manuscripts she had studied, of the quiet hours spent copying letters, learning meanings, and listening to the stories embedded in words. She spoke of the modest life she had lived, working to support herself and her family, learning in small moments that most people overlooked. Her story was simple, honest, and heartfelt. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room shifted once more. The experts realized that her understanding was not accidental. It was born from experience, patience, and dedication. They had studied extensively, yes, but they had not lived with the words in the same intimate way. Her insight was not just intellectual, it was lived, breathed, and understood on a personal level. For many, this was a revelation. They began to recognize that knowledge without context and experience could only go so far. True wisdom required a connection beyond what could be learned from books alone. Some experts, still struggling with pride, tried to defend themselves quietly, but the sheikh's calm presence prevented confrontation. Instead, he encouraged reflection, inviting everyone to consider the lessons of the moment. The room became a place of learning, not judgment, and the young waitress, who had feared speaking, found herself at the center of a quiet but profound transformation. Her courage to speak, her willingness to share knowledge despite her position, had shifted the entire dynamic of the room. After some time, the sheikh addressed the group again. "You have all demonstrated knowledge, skill, and dedication. Yet today you have also learned humility. You have seen that wisdom can come from unexpected places, and that true understanding is measured not by recognition, but by insight." His words were deliberate, and they sank deeply into the minds of those present. The experts, who had come with confidence and certainty, now carried a new awareness. The waitress, meanwhile, felt a quiet pride. She had not sought recognition, but she had earned respect, and that felt more meaningful than any applause. The session continued with a gentler tone after that. The experts listened more carefully, spoke more thoughtfully, and considered perspectives they might have dismissed before. The young waitress moved quietly around the room, serving tea and keeping an eye on the conversation. She was no longer invisible. Her presence, her knowledge, and her courage had changed the energy of the room. It was a subtle change, but one that everyone could feel. By the time the session ended, the sheikh stood and smiled. "Today has been more than a test of knowledge. It has been a reminder that learning is ongoing, and that respect for insight comes in many forms. You have all witnessed that wisdom does not always come from the expected places." He looked around the room, his eyes resting for a moment on the young waitress. She nodded, a mixture of relief and quiet pride washing over her. She had faced fear, spoken her truth, and been heard. The room, once filled with tension and competition, was now filled with reflection, humility, and a sense of shared understanding. As the experts filed out, still murmuring among themselves, some pausing to acknowledge the waitress personally, she returned to her tasks with a smile. She knew that this day would remain with her forever, not because of recognition or reward, but because she had spoken when it mattered, and her words had made a difference. The sheikh, remaining behind briefly, observed the room with satisfaction. He had not just tested knowledge. He had revealed character, courage, and the power of quiet wisdom. And in doing so, he had reminded everyone present that true understanding often lies hidden in the places we least expect to find it. The room was quiet, almost reverent, after the Sheikh's words. The experts had left their pride at the door, replaced by curiosity, humility, and a subtle sense of awe. The young waitress, who had once felt invisible, now felt an unfamiliar sensation, attention, but not the kind that humiliated or judged. It was the attention of people realizing they had underestimated her, of people seeing something they had ignored for too long. She still carried her tray, moving quietly, but her mind was alive with a strange mix of pride and nervousness. She knew the next few moments could change everything. The Sheikh spoke again, his voice calm but compelling. "We have seen the limits of knowledge that rests only in titles. Now, we must see the power of understanding that comes from living, from observation, from dedication beyond recognition." His eyes swept across the room slowly, then stopped on her. "You have demonstrated insight. Tell me more about how you came to this understanding." Her heart raced. She had shared some of her story, but she had not gone into detail. Now, in front of 40 experts and the Sheikh himself, she felt both exposed and honored. She took a deep breath, setting down the tray completely this time, and began to speak. She spoke of her childhood, growing up in a modest home where books and manuscripts were treasures. She described how her grandfather had taught her to listen to every word, to hear the meaning in the pauses, to understand the emotion behind the phrases. She spoke of mornings spent copying texts by hand, of evenings reading aloud until she could feel the words in her chest. The experts listened in silence, some leaning forward, others still skeptical but unable to look away. Her voice was soft but clear, and as she spoke, the room seemed to shift. It was as if the walls themselves absorbed her words, as if everyone present could feel the depth of her experience. The Sheikh nodded ever so slightly, encouraging her, giving her the space to tell her story fully. She continued, explaining how she had worked in hotels, serving tables and carrying trays, never thinking anyone would notice the knowledge she had quietly accumulated. She described the struggles of balancing work with study, of learning not for certificates but for the love of understanding. By the time she finished, there was a stillness in the room that was almost tangible. The Sheikh looked at her with a faint smile. "You have lived the words, not just learned them," he said. "That is rare and that is precious. Knowledge can be taught, but understanding must be experienced. You have done both." One of the experts, an older man who had spent decades studying classical Arabic, spoke next. His voice was low and measured. I must admit, I have never heard the phrase explained with such clarity and depth. I have studied these texts for years, and yet you have revealed something I had overlooked. It is remarkable." His words were sincere, tinged with humility. Others nodded quietly, some shifting uncomfortably as they realized the truth in what he said. The room was no longer about who was the most learned. It was about truth, and the waitress had brought it forward. The Sheikh then asked a question that drew everyone's attention again. If knowledge can appear in unexpected places, what does this teach us about how we value people? The experts were silent at first, reflecting. The young waitress considered the question herself. She had felt invisible most of her life, judged not for what she knew, but for her position, her appearance, and her title or lack of one. She realized that true understanding required humility and openness, and that sometimes the loudest voices were not the wisest. She spoke softly, but with confidence. "People should not be judged by their roles or appearances," she said. "Knowledge can exist quietly. Understanding can live where no one expects it. And respect should be given to those who seek truth, not only to those who hold titles." The Sheikh's eyes shone with approval. "Well said," he replied. "This is why I test not only knowledge but character. You have shown both." Some experts nodded in agreement, others looked thoughtful, and a few seemed uneasy as if they were confronting a truth they had avoided for years. They realized that in their pursuit of prestige, They had forgotten the essence of learning, the curiosity, the dedication, and the humility to recognize insight wherever it comes from. The young waitress, who had once felt unseen, was now a teacher in her own right, not because of credentials, but because of authenticity and courage. As the session continued, the sheikh asked her to expand on her explanation of the phrase. She began carefully, analyzing each word, its historical significance, and the emotions it carried. She spoke about how context changed meaning, how culture shaped expression, and how living with the words allowed one to understand them fully. Her explanations were precise, yet gentle, and they invited reflection rather than debate. The experts listened intently, some scribbling notes, others whispering observations to each other. Even those who had been skeptical moments ago found themselves absorbing her words, realizing that her understanding was not only correct but richer than they had imagined. After a while, the sheikh turned to the experts. "Do you see now why knowledge alone is not enough?" he asked. "You have studied, you have memorized, you have repeated what others have said. Yet understanding requires more. It requires listening, observing, and engaging with life itself." The experts were silent, some nodding slowly, others with furrowed brows, digesting the lesson. The young waitress felt a quiet satisfaction. She had not sought recognition, but the impact of her words was clear. She had changed the tone of the room, shifted the conversation, and opened minds. It was not an easy position, but she realized that courage was often quiet, and that speaking truth, even when unseen, was a powerful act. The sheikh then asked the experts if any of them had questions for the waitress. At first, there was hesitation. They had come expecting to impress her, but now they found themselves learning from her. Slowly, one of the younger experts raised a hand. "How did you acquire such depth of understanding without formal study?" he asked. The waitress smiled faintly. "I have studied in my own way," she replied. "Not in classrooms, but with life. I read manuscripts, listened to my grandfather, and observed the world around me. I learned to pay attention to details that others might overlook. That, combined with patience and curiosity, allowed me to see meaning that is often hidden." The expert nodded thoughtfully. "I see," he said. "It is impressive. You have reminded me that learning is more than books. It is living, observing, and connecting with what you study." As the conversation continued, the energy in the room transformed completely. Where there had been tension, pride, and competition, there was now curiosity, respect, and reflection. The experts began to speak more openly, asking questions, offering interpretations, and discussing nuances they had previously missed. The sheikh's presence was quiet but guiding, encouraging exploration without judgment. And the young waitress, once silent in the background, was now a central figure in a genuine dialogue about language, culture, and understanding. After hours of discussion, the sheikh finally stood and addressed the room. "Today has shown that true understanding does not come from recognition, but from dedication and courage. You have seen that wisdom can be found in unexpected places, and that humility is the key to growth. Let this lesson remain with you, not as a test of knowledge, but as a reminder of what is possible when you seek truth without pride." The experts absorbed his words, some quietly, others with visible emotion. The young waitress felt a sense of calm and fulfillment. She had spoken her truth, and it had been heard, valued, and respected. She realized that her courage had created an opportunity, not just for herself, but for everyone in the room, to rethink what knowledge and understanding truly meant. As the session came to a close, the sheikh asked her to sit for a moment with him. She approached nervously, unsure of what to expect. The sheikh smiled kindly and said, "You have shown that true wisdom is often hidden. Your courage and insight have transformed this gathering. That is a rare gift." The waitress felt a warmth she had never experienced before. She had done what few dared to do: speak when she was expected to remain silent, offer truth when it was not requested, and teach when she was not recognized as a teacher. And now, in that quiet moment with the sheikh, she realized that her life could change in ways she had never imagined. The experts began to leave, some stopping to offer polite acknowledgments, others simply nodding in quiet respect. The young waitress returned to her duties, but her steps felt lighter, her mind buzzing with possibility. She had not sought fame, reward, or recognition, but she had earned something more valuable: respect, understanding, and a glimpse of the impact that courage and truth can have. The sheik remained for a few more moments, observing the room. He knew that this young woman had more potential than anyone present had yet realized. She had demonstrated that true insight comes not from titles or degrees, but from life, curiosity, and the courage to speak when it matters most. And in that quiet hotel room, a lesson was etched into every mind present. Never underestimate the unseen, never ignore the unheard, and always value wisdom wherever it may be found. The room had settled into a calm stillness after the intense discussion. The experts were quiet now, each lost in thought, reflecting on what had happened. The young waitress moved slowly, clearing a few empty cups, but her mind was still racing. She had not expected to be the center of attention, and yet the experience left her both nervous and exhilarated. She had spoken from her heart and knowledge, and the reaction had been beyond anything she imagined. The sheik finally motioned for everyone to sit. "I believe it is time to reveal the purpose of this gathering," he said softly. The room straightened immediately. Even the experts, who had felt prideful just hours ago, leaned in with curiosity and respect. The sheik's calm, confident voice carried a weight that made everyone feel the importance of the moment. "This has not been a simple test of knowledge," he continued. "It has been a test of character, of humility, of courage, and of the ability to recognize truth regardless of where it comes from." There was a soft murmur among the experts. Some exchanged glances, realizing that the evaluation had been deeper than they anticipated. The sheik turned his gaze to the young waitress, and for the first time, he allowed a faint smile to appear. "You have passed this test not only with knowledge, but with wisdom, patience, and courage. That is rare, and it is valuable." The young waitress felt her heartbeat quicken. She had known that speaking her truth had been risky, but she had not imagined this level of acknowledgement. She looked around at the experts, who now seemed more human, less like infallible scholars, and more like people who were learning a lesson alongside her. It was a strange sensation, to be both humble and recognized at the same time, but she accepted it quietly, nodding her head in gratitude. The sheik continued, "I invited 40 of the finest experts in Arabic language, not because I wanted to embarrass them, but because I wanted to see if true understanding could be recognized, even when it comes from unexpected places. Many of you relied on your titles, on your years of study, on what you thought knowledge should look like. You spoke confidently, yet some missed the deeper meaning. And she, who was overlooked, unseen, but dedicated, revealed the truth." The experts shifted uncomfortably. Some looked down, ashamed that their confidence had not matched their understanding. Others simply nodded, acknowledging a truth that was difficult to accept. The young waitress, standing quietly at the side, felt a strange mix of pride and humility. She had not sought this recognition, yet it was now hers to carry responsibly. One of the older experts raised his hand hesitantly. "Sir," he said, "it is remarkable what she has done. But how did you know she would answer? Why give this test to someone outside our field?" The sheik's eyes softened, and he responded with calm authority. "Knowledge and wisdom are not always found in classrooms or prestigious titles. Sometimes they are hidden in those who observe, who listen, and who care enough to understand deeply. She represents what is often overlooked: the potential, the dedication, and the courage of someone without recognition." This test was as much about seeing the experts as it was about finding her. The young waitress absorbed his words. She had never imagined that her life could intersect with such power and insight. She had lived quietly, working to support herself, learning in moments of solitude, never expecting anyone to notice. And yet here she was, standing in front of one of the wealthiest, most intelligent men in the world, having her knowledge and dedication acknowledged in a way that could change her life. The sheik gestured for her to step forward. "Come, sit with me," he said. She hesitated for only a moment before moving closer. The experts gave her space, watching respectfully, realizing that the moment was not theirs to intrude upon. As she sat down, the sheikh spoke directly to her. "You have done something extraordinary. You have shown that dedication and understanding can exist beyond the visible signs of achievement. That is rare, and it must be nurtured." He leaned slightly closer, his voice lower, as if sharing a secret meant only for her. "I would like to offer you an opportunity. You have demonstrated the ability to understand deeply, to see beyond what is obvious, and to speak with courage. I want to support your growth, to ensure that your knowledge and potential are recognized and cultivated. You have earned a place where your abilities can truly flourish." The young waitress felt her hands tighten in her lap. She had never imagined anything like this. Her life had been a series of quiet struggles, working long hours, learning in secret, and trying to survive in a world that often overlooked her. Now, a single moment of courage and insight had opened doors she never thought possible. Her eyes widened slightly, and she nodded, almost speechless. The sheikh continued, "I have established a foundation dedicated to preserving and promoting classical Arabic. I would like you to join us. You will have access to manuscripts, resources, and the opportunity to work alongside scholars and linguists who will value your insight. Your role will not be merely symbolic. You will have influence, responsibility, and the ability to make a meaningful impact." The young waitress felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had worked quietly for years, learning and growing, never expecting recognition. And now, the recognition was not empty. It was accompanied by trust, opportunity, and responsibility. She felt a sense of gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I never imagined anything like this. I will do my best." The sheikh nodded gently. "That is all I ask. Dedication and honesty are far more important than brilliance or titles. You have both. And now, it is time to see where that can take you." The experts, still watching, began to whisper among themselves. Some expressed admiration, others reflected on their own limitations, and a few simply looked astonished. The young waitress's journey had not only changed her own life, but had also shifted the perspective of everyone in the room. They had come with confidence, expecting to teach and impress, and they had learned a profound lesson about humility, observation, and the value of unrecognized talent. Over the next hour, the sheikh spoke privately with her, explaining the foundation's work, its goals, and the ways in which she could contribute. She listened carefully, taking in every detail, her mind racing with ideas and possibilities. She asked questions, shared insights, and discovered that her experiences, once thought small and insignificant, were now valuable assets in a much larger world. The weight of responsibility was new, but it was paired with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. The experts, having observed this private exchange, began to approach her with questions and congratulations. They no longer saw her as a simple waitress. They saw her as a scholar, a teacher, and someone who had changed the way they thought about learning. One professor admitted quietly that he had underestimated the depth of her understanding. Another said, with a faint smile, that he had learned more from listening to her than from years of study. The young waitress, though overwhelmed, responded with humility, emphasizing the importance of patience, observation, and listening. By the end of the day, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The sheikh had made his point, not with force, but through observation, guidance, and a test that revealed character and wisdom. The young waitress, once invisible and overlooked, had proven that knowledge and courage could not be confined to titles, certificates, or social status. She had spoken her truth, faced fear, and been recognized not only for what she knew but for who she was. As she prepared to leave the room, the sheikh placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Remember this," he said. "Your journey is only beginning. You have shown the courage to speak and the wisdom to understand. Never forget the value of patience, observation, and humility. Those qualities will guide you far beyond what you can imagine today." The young waitress nodded, feeling a deep sense of resolve. Her life had changed in ways she had never dared to dream. She had discovered that courage, knowledge, and dedication were often hidden in the quiet corners of life, and that speaking truth when it matters could open doors that had seemed impossible to reach. She left the room with a new sense of purpose, knowing that this day would remain etched in her memory forever. The Sheikh watched her go, a small smile on his face. He had tested 40 experts and found something extraordinary in someone who had been invisible to them. The lesson had been profound. True understanding cannot be measured by appearances or status. It can be found in dedication, courage, and the willingness to speak when it matters most. The young waitress had proven this truth, and in doing so, she had changed the lives of everyone in that room. The young waitress stepped out of the hotel room, the soft hum of activity in the lobby feeling different somehow. The sunlight that streamed through the glass doors seemed warmer, more promising, as if it carried with it a sense of possibility she had never experienced before. She walked slowly, her mind replaying the events of the day. 40 experts, the Sheikh, the discussion, the silent tension that had been transformed by her words. It all felt surreal. And yet, every moment had been real, every word she had spoken had mattered, and the recognition she had received was undeniable. For years, her life had been quiet and simple. She had worked long hours, carried trays of tea and coffee, and done her best to stay unnoticed while balancing her responsibilities at home. Her knowledge had been her private companion, nurtured in small, stolen moments, with nobody to witness it. Today had changed that. Today, she realized that her dedication and courage had power, the kind that could open doors and shift perspectives. And she felt a new responsibility rising inside her. She could no longer hide her abilities. In the days that followed, the Sheikh made arrangements to involve her in the foundation he had described. She was introduced to scholars, linguists, and historians who worked tirelessly to preserve classical Arabic. She found herself in a library filled with manuscripts she had only dreamed of seeing. The delicate pages smelled of history, the ink faded but alive with stories waiting to be understood. She spent hours reading, copying, and studying, but now her efforts were recognized, supported, and encouraged. Every question she asked was answered thoughtfully, every insight she shared was valued, and slowly, the quiet confidence she had carried alone became a shared strength. At first, the adjustment was challenging. She had lived a life where her efforts were invisible, where mistakes were forgiven quietly, and where her success was measured only by survival. Now, every action she took felt amplified. Scholars sought her opinion, meetings were scheduled to hear her interpretation, and the Sheikh himself occasionally asked for her insight on particularly complex manuscripts. It was overwhelming, but she approached each challenge with the same patience and humility that had carried her through the test. Each new responsibility was an opportunity to grow, to apply what she had learned in silence for so many years. One afternoon, as she carefully examined an ancient manuscript, a group of scholars approached her. They had been struggling with a particularly difficult text for weeks, unable to interpret a series of phrases that seemed contradictory. She looked at the lines carefully, read them aloud softly to herself, and explained the subtle nuances that were lost in translation. The scholars listened, some skeptical at first, and then gradually, their expressions shifted to amazement. "This is remarkable," one said quietly. "How did you see this where we could not?" She simply smiled, recalling the countless hours she had spent learning to observe, to listen, and to understand context, not just words. Word of her abilities spread quickly within the foundation and beyond. The Sheikh, impressed not only by her knowledge but by her humility and work ethic, spoke highly of her at cultural gatherings, introducing her as an invaluable contributor to the preservation of classical Arabic. Invitations to lectures, discussions, and panels began to arrive. People who had once overlooked her now sought her insight, eager to learn from someone whose understanding was both deep and lived. Yet she remained grounded, never forgetting the long years of quiet study and work that had brought her to this moment. Despite the sudden change in her life, she maintained her connection to the world she had come from. She continued to support her family, using her new position to provide stability and opportunity for those she loved. She mentored younger students who were eager to learn, showing them that dedication and courage could outweigh privilege and titles. Her story became an inspiration, not because she had wealth or fame, but because she had demonstrated that wisdom could emerge from overlooked places, and that courage to speak when it mattered could change lives. One evening, the Sheikh invited her to a private dinner. They spoke about her journey, her experiences, and her vision for the future. "You have transformed more than your own life," he said quietly. "You have reminded scholars, experts, and everyone who has witnessed your work that humility, patience, and courage are as important as knowledge itself. That is a gift far greater than any title." She felt a deep gratitude, understanding that her success was not only personal, but also a contribution to a broader world of learning and understanding. The young waitress, now a respected member of the foundation, continued to explore ancient texts, develop insights, and guide discussions. She wrote articles and gave talks, always keeping the same gentle tone and humility that had defined her character. People came to respect her not for the sudden fame or opportunities, but because of the authenticity and dedication she demonstrated in every word and action. Her life had changed dramatically, but she remained the same person at heart, a learner, an observer, and someone who valued understanding above recognition. Months later, she returned to the hotel where it had all begun. She walked quietly through the lobby, remembering the tension, the silence, and the moment when she had first spoken. She paused near the table where she had served tea, thinking of the young woman she had been, unsure of her place in the world, unnoticed and underestimated. Now, standing there with years of study and experience behind her, she smiled quietly. That girl had grown into someone who could face challenges with courage, who could speak truth even when unseen, and who could inspire others simply by being herself. The Sheikh visited again shortly after, observing her work and the influence she had begun to have within the foundation. "You have done well," he said. "Your journey is a reminder that opportunity often meets preparation, and courage meets recognition. Never forget the lessons of that day in the hotel room. They are as important now as they were then." She nodded, grateful for the guidance, yet proud of the path she had carved for herself. Her story soon became well known, shared among scholars, students, and the wider public. Many were inspired not only by her intelligence but by the courage and patience she had shown. She received letters and messages from young learners who had felt overlooked in their own lives, seeking advice and encouragement. She wrote back to each one, always reminding them that knowledge could be nurtured quietly, and that speaking the truth with humility and courage could open doors no one had imagined. Years passed, and her contributions to the foundation grew. She became a mentor, guiding projects, discovering hidden manuscripts, and helping scholars interpret difficult texts. Her life had transformed completely, yet she never lost sight of her roots. The quiet diligence, the hours of learning in private, and the courage to speak when it mattered most. Her story became a testament to the power of persistence, humility, and wisdom beyond titles or appearances. One day, she was invited to speak at an international cultural conference. As she stood on the stage, looking out at an audience filled with scholars, students, and curious minds from around the world, she remembered the hotel room, the 40 experts, and the Sheikh's test. She shared her journey, her lessons, and her philosophy of learning. She spoke about observation, patience, courage, and the value of listening to voices that are often ignored. The audience listened intently, inspired not by wealth or privilege, but by the authenticity of her words and the depth of her experience. When she finished, the applause was long and heartfelt. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, understanding that her life had become a bridge between worlds, the quiet, unnoticed spaces where learning begins, and the halls of recognition where knowledge is celebrated. She had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of others who would follow in her footsteps, learning that courage and understanding often arrive quietly, waiting for someone willing to notice and speak. The Sheikh watched from the audience, a small smile on his face. He had recognized her potential long before the world did, but seeing her now, confident, respected, and making an impact, brought a profound satisfaction. She had proven that true wisdom is not measured by certificates, titles, or appearances, but by dedication, insight, and courage. And she had shown that when opportunity meets preparation, and courage meets recognition, lives can be transformed in ways that were once unimaginable. Her life had changed completely, but she remained the same at heart. A learner, a teacher, and a witness to the power of quiet courage. And in that transformation, she discovered a truth that would guide her forever. Knowledge may open doors, but humility, patience, and courage allow us to walk through them fully. And so, the young waitress who had once served tea quietly, unnoticed and underestimated, had become a woman whose voice, wisdom, and courage could inspire the world. Her journey was proof that greatness often begins in unseen places, that courage is quietly revolutionary, and that those who believe in themselves and their truth can change not only their lives but the lives of everyone around them.